Frightened by that nightmare, Pelayo ran to get Elisenda, his wife, who was putting compresses on the sick child, and he took her to the rear of the courtyard. They both looked at the fallen body with a mute stupor. He was dressed like a rag picker. There were only a few faded hairs left on his bald skull, and very few teeth in his mouth, and his pitiful condition of a drenched great-grandfather took away any sense of grandeur he might have had. His huge buzzard wings, dirty and half-plucked, were forever entangled in the mud. So in all aspects, the writer is presenting a very sorry figure, a disheveled figure in all mud, covered with all mud and soot, and he is lying down in a very pitiable condition, all alone and totally in a state of weakness. So he has the appearance of a supernatural being, but in all aspects the being appears to be very weak and totally dependent on humans. And we find here the immediate reaction of Pelayo, and he is running towards his home to call Elisenda to bring her to the scene in order to help him do something for the old man. So he does not know. He is in a state of panic, and he is running back home and bringing her to get some solution. They looked at him so long and so closely that Pelayo and Elisenda were soon overcame with surprise, and in the end found him familiar. So that line is very important, because even though in the beginning the creature appeared very, very unfamiliar, extraordinary, but soon the extraordinariness faded and he has become very familiar to them. So again, the writer is bringing forth a common human tendency to make even the supernatural natural through our constant knowing and constant understanding of the character or of the person. So as time progressed, they are able to know this. They are able to know this creature in a better way. So at the very outset, they felt that the creature had the appearance of a rag picker. So that is how they are equating the supernatural being to. So see how a kind of deconstruction is taking place here. A kind of inversion is taking place here. So the supernatural being, the grandeur of the supernatural being is literally subverted by the humans, Elisenda and Pelayo. So they are comparing him to a rag picker, and they are looking closely at the bald head without hairs, and with just a few strands of hair on it, and they could also see that there were only few teeth in his mouth. So these are actually the external appearance and the innate features of the supernatural being. So in short, the human figures, the human characters, the human couple, they could not find anything extraordinary on this fantastical being, except for the fact that it has 2 wings. Okay, the man has 2 wings. So that was the only extraordinary aspect about the supernatural being. Then they dared speak to him, and he answered in an incomprehensible dialect with a strong sailor's voice. That was how they skipped over the inconvenience of the wings, and quite intelligently concluded that he was a lonely castaway from some foreign ship wrecked by the storm. So somehow they are trying to place him and trying to find something more about him, because he was very, very unintelligible in his articulation. So whatever he spoke, they could not understand. And by the way, by the kind of sound he created, they tried to place him as a castaway sailor who has been saved from a wrecked ship. So that was how they are trying to find some sort of understanding about this lonely creature, this lonely being who is found at the rear of their threshold, at the rear of their courtyard. So here we can find about the kind of perception of these ordinary human beings, how they perceive a supernatural being, and how varied their perceptions are, and how incapable the ordinary humans are in understanding the grandeur and the essence of a supernatural being. That is what Gabriel Garcia Marquez subtly presents. And yet they called in a neighbor woman who knew everything about life and death to see him, and all she needed was one look to show them their mistake. So again, the writer is bringing forth a common human practice. There are people who have a tendency to show off their knowledge and who have a tendency to bring forth solutions to fix the entire problems of the world, and one such character is brought out here, and she's a neighbor woman, and she comes there and she tries to fix the problem. He's an angel, she told them. He must have been coming for the child, but the poor fellow is so old that the rain knocked him down. So that is the practical solution or the explanation put forth by the neighbor woman. She says that he's an angel. Don't you know that? He's an angel and he has come to seize the life of your child last night. But unfortunately, it was the rain that knocked him down. That is the reason. Otherwise, your child would have been killed, or its life might have been snatched by this angel. So he is considered as an angel of death, which has come to take away the life of the child on the previous night. But luckily that did not happen, since the rain knocked him down. So again, a common belief that is very common among the Columbians is actually what the writer brings forth here. On the following day, everyone knew that a flesh and blood angel was held captive in Pelaya's house, against the judgment of the wise neighbor woman, for whom angels in those times were the fugitive survivors of a spiritual conspiracy. They did not have the heart to club him to death. So here the next paragraph speaks about how the people reacted to the supernatural being on the next day when they saw him. And people, they literally got divided into two factions, and majority of the people were kind, and at least they did not attack him. But at least some were judgmental, and they followed the scriptures, and they followed the belief that angels can be evilsome, since they were ejected from heaven due to their disobedience. So the religious scriptings and how it influenced some, and how they tried to make people react against the angels. But luckily, the community or the neighborhood, the majority of the neighborhood, they did not react against the against the angel. So that is a very positive expression from the people. They did not at least club him to death. They did not beat him to death. Pelayo watched over him all afternoon from the kitchen, armed with his bailiff's club, and before going to bed, he dragged him out of the mud and locked him up with the hens in the wire chicken coop. In the middle of the night, when the rain stopped, Pelayo and Elisanda were still killing crabs. A short time afterward, the child woke up without a fever and with a desire to eat. So again, the activities of the couple is described. So they have been watching closely over the movements of the fallen angel, the supernatural being, and they have been particularly attentive because they do not know whether it is an evil or a benign being. So the suspicion and the doubts they have is reflected here. But they have been kind enough to drag him at least out of the muddy water and provide a dry space for him in the chicken coop. So at least that much of humaneness is expressed by the couple. And a short time afterwards, they again started continuing their habitual action of killing the crabs. So again, we find a kind of shift from a good action to a bad one. So once again they have gone back to their aggressive mode of killing those crabs. A short time afterward, the child woke up without a fever and with a desire to eat. So the sudden healing of the child, and that is the miraculous healing of the child, is totally mysterious for the couple, and they could not find any explanation for it, and they felt so much filled with gratitude for the supernatural being, and they associated with the sudden healing with the presence of the presence of the supernatural being, and they became suddenly magnanimous and kind towards the supernatural being. Then they felt magnanimous and decided to put the angel on a raft with fresh water and provisions for 3 days and leave him to his fate on the high seas. So all on a sudden we find a transformation in their attitude. So they became instantly kind enough to support him with provisions and water. So till then they did not provide him anything at all. But all on a sudden, when they were blessed and when their child got healed, suddenly they are becoming so much magnanimous and a kindful host. But they went out into the courtyard with the first light of dawn. They found the whole neighborhood in front of the chicken coop having fun with the angel without the slightest reverence, tossing him things to eat through the openings in the wire as if it weren't a supernatural creature but a circus animal. So the last paragraph brings forth a very shocking spectacle where we find the entire neighborhood standing around the chicken coop, throwing and putting all sorts of eatables to him as if it were a circus animal. So how sublime can be turned into ridiculous. That's what we find here. So an anticlimax of the situation is brought out here, where the supernatural being is treated as though it were a circus animal. So the inability of ordinary people, human beings, to understand and perceive reality is what the writer describes here through this paragraph.